Okay, thanks for joining me today on Veterans Chronicles. I'm joined by Gregory Haack, U.S. Army veteran. We're here at the Military Order of the Purple Heart Convention in Norfolk. Gregory, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
But where were you born and raised?
I was born in Madison, Wisconsin, 1980. Nice little quaint community. You know.
And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that your dad is a Vietnam vet.
Yes.
And you said your grandfather's a World War II vet?
Korea.
Korea.
Yep.
Okay. And was that an inspiration for joining, or did that influence your growing up at all?
I think I knew at a young age, right off the bat. Service was meant for me. Being that my grandfather was a Korean vet and my dad was Vietnam, I naturally assumed that I should probably follow in the footsteps, even though they kind of discouraged me. I felt it was something I had to do, just because of it's a civic duty. I mean, we're on all volunteer Army now, and when I basically, at 18, I was going to join, and my parents actually talked me into going to college. So I went to college, and just right before I graduated, 9/11 happened. And I said to myself, this is your decision time. You said by 25, you'd either go in or you wouldn't. Well, I was 21 at the time when 9/11 happened, and I said, I'm going to finish college because I've started this. I need to finish it. And then I decided it was time. So I got a recruiter, and I went in.
So did you join 2001, 2002?
I didn't get through college till about 04, okay. Early 04. And within 2 months, I was at basic training. So.
Okay. So tell me what that was like and about your time in the Army.
Well, I started out in Fort Leonard Wood as an MP. My original choice for an MOS was Cav Scout, and my dad kind of talked me out of it. Being a Vietnam vet, he reminded me that the life expectancy of a Cav Scout was very short. So he said, why not go ahead and do something that you're interested in, that you could possibly pursue a career afterward. And I figured I was into law enforcement at the time, and so I decided that might be an option, and so I became an MP. So at 04, I was pretty much in basic training for 17 weeks, OSUT. And when I finished that, I went home and did hometown recruiting for about a month, and about October, I was at Fort Riley, my first duty station in Kansas. About 5 months later, I was in Iraq. It was just that quick a turnaround. Got a lot of experience right off the bat from some of the guys that had just come back, and they trained us up and got us all ready, and we deployed. I did 1 year tour there. I took no mid-tour leave, so it was 365 days straight. Most people think that's just nuts, but I couldn't come home and go back. My mindset would not be able to adjust. So I decided to stay, did my year, came home. We were home for about 13 months doing road work. As an MP, you're not only a combat support unit, but you're also a garrison support unit, which we did Kansas law. We basically patrolled the base, made sure everybody was basically safe. You know, we're assist, protect, defend. That was our motto. So, and of the troops and for the troops. So we transitioned a lot between law enforcement and then going back to a combat state. When we found out we were deploying again in 07, we immediately dropped what we were doing on garrison and picked up combat. So we trained up for that. I went back in, I think it was early 07, and ended up doing another 15 months. And again, I took no mid-tour leave, which everybody thought I was crazy. In fact, my first sergeant tried to make me take leave, and my sergeant major said, no, he doesn't have to. So I was actually kind of happy my sergeant major backed me up. But it was one of them things that you can't get your mind wrapped around. And I've heard from many, many different people, they just couldn't get back into it. You can see the transition. Like they go home, they're excited, they come back, and it's just a different world for them. And it's hard to pick back up on that. Let's see here, 05, 06, I ended up picking up some metal in my leg. It was, I probably won't go into that one, but ended up taking some metal in the leg. They couldn't find it. I was at a field hospital. They thought it was in and out. A little piece that broke off, stuck in the bone. They couldn't find it. Came home in those 13 months, like I had said before, I deployed the second time, and still they couldn't find it. I started having pain, stuff like that. I figured growing pains, I'm getting older, we're carrying all this weight, So you dismissed it. I figured, maybe it was just a hard day of PT. Well, it turned out I had an infection and nobody caught it. And I actually did my second tour with the metal in my leg, and they didn't even know it. So by the time I came home, I was starting to get sicker and sicker, and I ended up having they had to take the leg due to an infection. So it was kind of one of those things I couldn't pursue any farther into the military than where I was. And it just kind of, you just shake your head and you accept it. So.
How did they eventually find the metal?
I got out and I went to the VA and I said, nobody can find out what's wrong with me. And I actually was diagnosed with Crohn's, which was actually, I had a ruptured intestine and started to fill in a cavity into my hip, which caused more infection. By the time they figured out what was always going on, I had a blood infection, a bone infection, a staph infection on my heart, lung, and brain, bacterial pneumonia, and I was septic and went into a 7-day coma. They didn't expect me to wake up. They told my parents to say goodbye. 7th day, I snapped out of it. They said, you've got 2 options. We can pump you full of the strongest antibiotics like we've been doing for the last week and take our chances, or we take your leg and you wake up in the morning. So it was a no-brainer. I basically said at I think I was 28 years old, that it's time to go, it's got to go. And next day I was in surgery, they took the leg. So, and I'm here today.
Did they take the full leg?
Nope, they actually, they call it above the knee, but it's actually directly through the knee. I still have a lot of function with the knee joint itself, but not fully functional for a lower limb prosthetic.
And this was how long after your second tour?
Probably about, I want to say 8 or 9 months. And it just was snowballed so quick that they ended up having to take about 28 inches of my intestine and a quarter of my colon, my appendix, my gallbladder, pretty much all those non-essential organs that were damaged. So I also had a hip infection that they couldn't do anything with, so they basically pulled the hip out, removed the head of the bone, and reinserted the shaft back into the hip joint. It's also known as a girdle stone. Basically, I had a straight leg. I couldn't sit, couldn't bend, whatever, and I had a hard time getting the VA to replace even one of my hips because of an infection risk. Well, I ended up proving them wrong 4 years later when they did one of my hips, because that one had collapsed in the meantime with avascular necrosis. And it basically turned out that they could do it, and they turned around and did the other leg, and now I'm full functional. I'm about to get off my cane, and I've been on crutches and a cane for 4 years. So it's been an eye-opener.
Wow. Tell me a bit about the recovery process.
It's long. And in fact, I had just actually mentioned this to somebody. I remember the day laying in the hospital saying to myself, I wonder what it's going to be like when I'm healed, when I'm back to a normal, or somewhat of a normal. And I looked back at it about a week ago, and I said, this is it. This is that time. And it just was, it felt great. I mean, it just was one of those feelings you just can't explain. It just filled me with such energy and like positive feelings. And I was always told I had a positive attitude about it all while I was going. And my response was, I lived 30 years with it. I can live 30 years without it. It's not going to change who I am. I'm still the person I am today, and I won't change. And I'm pretty happy with the positivity that I exuberate to people, because they all say I'm an inspiration. I don't see it, but so many people tell me. I just kind of I shake my head. I say, you're my inspiration. So
that's amazing. How did you get connected with the Purple Heart?
Actually, I can credit that to my buddy Jason Johns. He's the Judge Advocate General here, or National Judge Advocate General. It turned out we met at a Memorial Day ceremony right outside of my town. He actually only lived about 2 miles from me, and he became my peer mentor. And we basically started doing Wounded Warrior projects, Wounded Warrior in Action project hunts. He basically just pulled me in and treated me just like family. So, and at that point in my life, I was kind of at a low spot. Everything had just snowballed and caved in, and I didn't have any direction. I didn't know where I was going with my life because all this change happened so fast that he basically said, come and see what this organization is about. I'd love to get you in here. After I turned down 2 other Purple Hearts, the VA actually put me in for my Purple Heart, and it passed. And I actually wouldn't, I'm glad they did, because I wouldn't be in the position I am now with this organization if he hadn't done that. So I do give a lot of credit to him for basically grabbing me by my bootstraps and saying, this isn't you. You're so much more than this. So the organization has done a lot for me as far as wanting to help vets, getting back into just life. You know, I mean, I see all these World War II veterans, Korean veterans with missing limbs still, you know, and I'm no different than them. And that's the thing. You come to these things and everybody's got a story. Everybody shares that story, and we're open about it, because you can't really talk to civilians as much as you could with a veteran, because they understand and they've been there. They know the suck. It's just something we all share. So when sharing like this with you in an interview, it's okay, we can talk, but it wouldn't be like if I was sitting here talking with my buddy Jason. You know, and most veterans will say the same thing. The general population doesn't understand veterans because they've never had to experience the hardship that we did. And that's okay. It's not for everybody. And like I've always said, I couldn't be a recruiter because I couldn't try and persuade somebody to do it. It's in you. You're either gonna do it or you're not. And we hear these people say, well, I almost joined. Well, we're that group that didn't almost join. We did. And that kind of, it doesn't make us any better, but it sets us apart. And the confidence you get from actually being in the military, and even the Purple Heart here, just that confidence of being able to help other veterans is something you just, it's that feeling you get. I get energized. Like these conventions, just energy flows. And that's what it's about. It's the helping the other veterans. That's
definitely what makes these conventions and groups like Military Order of the Purple Heart so special is I can imagine it's really helpful for the healing process and just for sharing those stories because like you said, you know, as much as civilians want to understand, that level of empathy and understanding is just not there.
Yes.
So it makes it all the more special to have friends like your friend Jason. And you mentioned earlier before we were filming about the work that you do now. Did you want to go into that a little bit?
Well, right now I'm retired. The order is I am the Global War on Terrorism State Coordinator for the state of Wisconsin. It's kind of a new position that we're trying to reach out to the Global War on Terrorism era, Afghanistan, Iraq, just to get more involvement because these gentlemen that are here hold positions that they can't hold forever, and they need somebody to pass that torch to. And right now they're working some different angles for myself to be able to move up into more of the national spotlight, just so I've got this thing with the VA. It is where it is today, and it's getting better, but there's always things that can be changed. And without that feedback and people actively being involved with it, it won't change. There was always a stigmatism of the VA, being that's the place you go to die. Well, I'm a living proof that I went to the VA and I lived. So the more message we can get out with the VA, Purple Heart, and all this, the better we're gonna be in helping vets and their families. And it just doesn't stem with just the vets, it's their families, surviving members, scholarship funds, stuff like that. So It's an amazing organization when it comes to helping, and that's mainly what I wanted to do when I got out of the hospitals. I wanted to give back. I mean, they did so much for me. I mean, at the state I was, that I needed to give back, and this is one way that I can do that.
Greg, thank you for talking with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to say about your service?
It's not for everybody, but you'd remember the good times. You'd try not to remember the bad times, and in fact, I got more stories about good times and stuff that happened than I do about my bad times, and I'm happy with that. It's something that you've got to be able to transition to, and not necessarily push it down, but if you need the help, get the help. There's no shame in asking for help. I did, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't. So, as far as like the military goes, I don't recommend it to everybody, but if you've got that feeling that you need to help and that's one way you can do it, I recommend it. Look into it, but don't go in blind. Talk to people.
You've served our nation for some time. When you look back on your service, what are you most proud of?
I've been asked this question before, and the best way I can explain it is I brought all my guys home. That was actually one of my reasons for joining, is I saw these 18, 21-year-old kids fighting for me when I'm able-bodied and I've got enough life knowledge that I can make a difference, and I brought them all home.
It's incredible. Greg, thank you for your service. Thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you.
I'm Megan Maggi, talking with Gregory Haack, U.S. Army veteran, here at the Military Order of the Purple Heart Convention in Norfolk, Virginia. This is Veterans Chronicles.